So, FunkyFrogBait has made an awful video regarding the bear v man debate. The amount of false equivalences, unfair comparisons, and misinterpreting of data that goes on in this video is quite insane. Personally, if you want my honest viewpoint on the man v bear question, I can understand why someone would make the bear choice when they are uninformed, and I would never judge women for that. After doing the research though, it seems silly for women to make that choice, but we'll see that research later on. If you are asking a would you rather, the two options are meant to be at best reflections of each other. That's how would you rathers work. And so, when asked would you rather meet a random man or bear, you are immediately assuming the man is violent because of the bear option, and because of the absurdity of even asking a question like this in the first place. Let me give you a scenario. If someone asked would you rather meet a black man or a white man in the woods, the assumption wouldn't be that one of them would be more violent, rather, the assumption would be that the person asking the question is racist, or at least baiting a racist answer. You see how the person asking the question is always going to be a part of the equation, right? Unfortunately, people make decisions and then rationalize them, instead of the other way around. That is what this video encompasses. But don't worry, I'm here to fact check every single point and get to the bottom of this issue. It's time to let the man v bear debate rest. So let's hear her out, shall we? Really? We're starting with the sit-down sigh? You couldn't have cut that out? Or are you apologizing for something?
Alright guys.
Oh boy, so you might have noticed that a lot of people are talking about bears right now. There hasn't been an uptick in interest in nature documentaries, and no, they're not talking about that stressful cooking show featuring the tragic little chef with big sad blue eyes.
The comedy in this video is not something that really matters to the overall point she's trying to make. If you like her jokes, then good on you. I personally find them to be quite unfunny. But that's subjective. In general, I'll cut out the jokes because they don't matter to what I'm arguing against or what she's arguing for, so this is your warning right now. If you want to see her video in its full context, I would recommend watching her video instead of solely mine. Link is in the description. I wanted to include all of her videos so that everyone got all the context she's making, but I can't promise that I won't cut out parts of this video. Thus, I'll include a timer on the bottom left. Or right, I don't know, I haven't done it yet, in order to let people know what parts they're missing.
About a month or so ago, a hypothetical was presented in a street interview and started to be shared around social media. Would you rather be stuck in a forest with a man or a bear?
Just like any other time-wasting nonsense that has taken the internet by storm, the bear v man question has taken over modern-day dialogue for like a few weeks. Afterwards, it died out like most other brain-dead trends. Thing is, when I learn of these trends, I always underestimate their virality, mostly because I am not perpetually online, so after a bunch of time passes, I end up making a video on a topic as if it's still relevant. I've done that in the past, and I'm definitely going to do that in the future. Doesn't spell success on YouTube, but it's definitely a worthy sacrifice if it means I won't have my brain melting from what idiots have to say on stupid topics. Her video is 8 months old now. Almost a full pregnancy. Like the video if you're 8 months pregnant. Regardless, this video is so bad that I need to throw my hat in the ring and respond to it. This isn't an insult to FunkyFrogBait. If I'm being completely genuine, I would say that she has definitely had a lot of comedic and dramatic experience, which is another way of saying that she is definitely funny to certain audiences that exclude me. She makes high-effort videos that are of great production quality and is passionate about her work. There's a reason she's successful. She's a good YouTuber, and even though it's a bit hyperbolic to say this, she has mastered her craft.
Would you rather be stuck in a forest with a man or a bear?
And almost unanimously, women everywhere have answered that they would prefer the bear.
Bear. With a bear. Bear.
Probably a bear.
Definitely a bear.
A bear.
Oh god, that's a terrible choice. Coming from a guy who has been assaulted by several men on different occasions in different contexts in the past, I'd rather have to deal with a man than a bear. I can communicate with a man, I can bargain with him, and at worst, I could kill him if I have to. You can't kill a bear, let alone bargain with it. You might think that a bear might leave you alone if you give it some meat or something, but a bear doesn't see a person who's giving it meat. A bear sees a big piece of meat, giving it a small piece of meat. It wants the big piece of meat.
The response to this, of course, has been for men to initiate a thoughtful discussion about the topic.
I never hit a woman violently.
You should expect an encounter with slippery skin soon enough.
No one said anything about serial killers. Nobody said anything about Jeffrey Dahmer.
Would I rather my mom be in the woods with a guy or a creature that would hunt her, jump up, grab her by the face, chomp down, cause her to have to take her thumb, jab it into its eyes?
So, let's talk about it.
Yes, let's do. There's so much to go over when it comes to this topic. So much data and numbers. I'm sure you brought all this data with you, FunkyFrogBait. Can I call you FFB? It's shorter.
Now, am I potentially gonna make a few people upset with this video? Do I in the woods? Yes, but I think this conversation is very important, so if you are someone who got angry the moment you saw the thumbnail, then I would just ask that you bear with me and watch till the end of the video. Okay?
Interesting preamble. The thumbnail of the video is a photo of Ted Bundy and a brown bear. As charitable as you try to be, this thumbnail specifically was made to stoke controversy. The biggest response that people have against the man v bear debate is that not all men are serial killers and ours. I'm gonna have to dance around words in this video. So when you put that image in the thumbnail, you are leaning into that supposed assumption and purposefully offending the people who make that argument. Is that the best approach? I don't know. I wasn't offended, mostly because I didn't notice the man. Ted Bundy barely registers to me for some reason. His face just doesn't jump out at me. And I always have to think, wait, who is this guy again? If you noticed the thumbnail and took offense, I don't think it's your fault. That was the point of the thumbnail. Leaning into the most common argument against choosing bear. I doubt anybody would watch the video if they found the thumbnail offensive, but if they wanted to be extra, they would probably just open the video, dislike it, and then shut it back down. That would be pretty petty.
Okay, let's start off by clarifying some things, because despite the fact that this hypothetical is extremely simple, there seems to be a lot of people unintentionally, and perhaps intentionally, misunderstanding it.
Really? People are misunderstanding this question? Well, maybe some people, but most people seem to have a grasp of what the point of the question is. How are people misunderstanding this question?
First off, you don't get to choose the man you're stuck in the woods with, like this charming fellow whose favorite Pop-Tart flavor is cinnamon. Apparently.
Wow, you completely misunderstood the point of this argument. When people say we don't mean a serial killer, they are arguing that you made your choice based on specific men, instead of men in general. Their argument is that serial killers and our people are incredibly rare, and that you are painting men with a very presumptuous and honestly sexist brush. It would be like assuming that women are too emotional to drive a car. They think the choice bear is stupid because if you were to come face to face with a bear, you are definitely going to die. Unless you know what you're doing.
The big mother grizzly. She was actually down on all four, and as she seen me, she stood up, and this giant bear stood right up in front of me. I didn't have a lot of time, but she come straight at me. She charged me, obviously protecting her car. It's like famous words now. I called her a f***ing mole because she scared me.
But because you have no clue what to do, at best you are getting eaten alive, and at worst you're slowly dying from exposure to the elements as your injuries go septic. That is of course ignoring any other animals that would find an injured human reeking of blood and decide to get a quick snack. Being face to face with a bear in the wild with no protection or connection to civilization is pretty rough. Meanwhile, if you choose men, getting an R person or a serial killer would be so impressively unlucky that a sizable chunk of the world will assume it must have been divine retribution. You know how people think that some things happen for a reason, instead of the reality that everything is insanely random? Think of it as rolling a one-sided die, if such a thing is possible, or a die with hundreds of millions of sides, and the overwhelming majority of those sides do not spell your doom. Unfortunately, most people don't know what to do if they encounter a bear, and even if you do know the procedures, you are not pulling an Adam Greentree balls of steel bear encounter. Your sorry ass is the bear's plaything 100% of the time. That being said, if you encounter a man in the woods, there are a lot more options that come before SA. Seriously, what kind of R person thinks of SA instead of, oh my god, finally someone to help me survive? You're arguing that the R person you might get will be too preoccupied occupied in expending thousands of calories, endangering himself and his survival before he tries to find water? Interestingly enough, that could be quite the story. A horrible man who's victimized so many has to survive with a perfect candidate for a victim. He can't make it known, obviously, but he's torn because he finally sees the type of people he's hurt in the past as more than just a tool for his pleasure. He can learn empathy because he is finally in the same boat as the representation of all of his victims. I should patent that. The point is that when someone says we are not talking about serial killers and you dismiss the example of the regular guy in this meme, you are both doing the same thing. You are both saying stop thinking of specifics, because to you there are a shit ton of men that victimize women based on specific examples, and to them there are a shit ton of men that would never victimize women based on the rarity of these specific examples. Put simply, you weigh the few examples we have of horrible people much too heavily for the reality of the situation.
That would obviously destroy the whole point of the hypothetical. If it's a choice between a bear or, say, Bear Grylls, I'm choosing the survivalist who will return my happy ass back to its natural habitat.
Really? Bear Grylls? You're both dead at that point. Thing is, when people are saying we are not talking about an R person or a murderer, they are saying stop being specific. Get it? The argument is that you need to be specific to get an R person. If you are not being specific and somehow you do get an R person, that would be quite an impressive turn of events. And I would recommend you go buy a lottery ticket and then use the millions of dollars to exact your sweet, sweet revenge.
This debate has quickly devolved into one side presenting statistics, personal testimonies, and criminal cases, while the other side taps the heels of their red pill slippers together, screaming, "Not all men, not all men, not all men," with their fingers jammed in their ears.
Oh my god, I love the dismissive attitude. By the way, if you're looking for numbers and statistics, you won't find many in this video, unfortunately. I, however, have done my research, and I will reference my proof in the description. I have read several papers relating to this topic, and I have numbers and census data. And by the way, an unbelievably ridiculous graph that puts into perspective this whole issue. The numbers are so hilariously weighed towards the man side of the man v bear argument that I wonder how someone could possibly take the bear side. Bears are mean, yo.
Ooh, it's a random manga panel with barely legible text. I'll be here all week. I'm sure I'm about to read something intellectually stimulating. Remember, it's man or bear, not fist or bear. Hey, quick question, weeb. Who's doing all the assaults then?
Rapists. The version of the question that this weeb, as you so lovingly call them, takes away the overwhelming likelihood of meeting a non-R person. When women are arguing that they don't want a man because they don't want to get R'd, informing them that the question wasn't would you rather get R'd or get mauled by a bear is logical. It'd be like asking a completely healthy person, would you rather eat ice cream or trail mix? And they choose trail mix because they don't want to get diabetes. There is a certain point where fears become irrational.
Because as we've mentioned on this channel before, according to the NSVRC, 1 in 5 women has experienced assault or attempted assault during her lifetime.
The data you showed is so limited in scope that it's laughable. Now, I greatly appreciate the NSVRC for making the numbers so clear and concise in their website, but unfortunately the 1 in 5 number is so very often misunderstood. Let me explain. When someone says 1 in 5 women get assaulted in their lifetime, the overwhelming majority of the American world assumes that it means if you take a group of any 5 women, the 5th one is 100% of the time going to have been SA'd.
And that's not true.
The 1 in something statistic style is referenced that way to drum up panic, more than it is used to shine a light on an issue. For example, look at the conveniently reworded version for men. Nearly a quarter, 24.8% of men in the US experience some form of contact as violence in their lifetime. According to the CDC, contact as violence includes R, being made to penetrate someone else, S, coercion, and or unwanted S, contact. God, the YouTube sensitivity is so stupid. Anyway, basically, it's the exact same thing, but the statistic isn't worded as 1 in 4 men in the United States experience complete or attempted R during their lifetime, and they included this illustration to not get called out for their double standard. The thing is, it's not true. 20%, or 1 in 5 of any group of women and 1 in 4 of any group of men will not be subjected to this hateful crime. What this unfortunate redressing of the number fails to account for is geographical location, lifestyle, lifestyle, income level, home status, age, race, education level, drug addiction, type of job, criminal background, and just about a billion other factors that could influence this metric. In other words, they are lying to you in order to make you feel like you are in more danger than you actually are. If I didn't know any better, I'd say that it's pretty irresponsible of the NSVRC to do this, and I would hope that they would reword their statistics to be a bit more accurate. It's like the wage gap. If you take every single woman and ignore their job choices, then surely there would be a discrepancy in payment. I have an awesome mental exercise for you to do, especially if you still believe in the wage gap. Imagine 10 men. Assign them random salaries without any mention of their job, age, education level, ambition, job location, or anything that could affect it. Split them into 2 groups of 5 and average out their salaries, and bada boom bada bing, you have a wage gap between men somehow. Hell, you don't even have to come up with a number. Just pick 10 random jobs on Indeed, or 2 even, and compare the salaries. Wow, there's a wage gap discrepancy between 2 different people? How? It is the same when it comes to SA of men. Even though the majority of the SA'd are men, the majority of men that are SA'd in prisons. If you are not in prison, then good for you, you square son of a bitch. You won't get anally raped.
No anal rape. No anal rape.
That's millions of women, and unless they're all being harassed by Diddler Dave, who is skewing the statistics with his incredible efficiency, mathematically speaking, there must be a non-trivial amount of men committing this type of crime.
You actually were on the right track there for a second. A paper published in 2002 called Repeat R and Multiple Offending Amongst Undetected R People shows through the data that they were able to collect, almost 2/3 in their sample size had multiple victims. Quote, within the universe of 3,698 violent acts that the 1,882 men in the sample were responsible for, the 76 repeat Rists by themselves accounted for 1,045 of that total. That is, representing only 4% of the sample, the repeat R people accounted for 28% of the violence. Their level of violence was nearly 10 times that of non-R people and nearly 3.5 times that of single-act R people. That is very important to recognize when wondering about the likelihood of meeting an R person. 4% of the men were responsible for 28% of the violence. If the majority of R-ing is committed by a few
Diddler Dave,
as you called them, that would be very helpful to point out, because then the male R-ist hysteria will be proven to have quite the shoddy foundation. When you say, mathematically speaking, there must be a non-trivial amount of men committing this type of crime, you reveal the failure of the 1 in 5 statistic that you so proudly referenced. Unfortunately, the only takeaway that most people will have from this deceptively presented statistic is that 1 in 5 men will commit an R at one point in their life at the worst. That is the unspoken belief that you made so clearly apparent in your video, yet reworded slightly to save face and not appear wholly uncharitable.
mathematically speaking, there must be a non-trivial amount of men committing this type of crime.
To people who believe this, be honest with yourself. Do you really think that there are so many male R-ists in the United States? Think of it this way, the majority of R-ists are men, yet the majority of the R-ed in the US are also men, according to the NSVRC. That would mean that up to a quarter of all men are gay R-ists, even though the percentage of gay and bisexual men in the US is 4.7% according to Statista, and I can't begin to imagine how small that number would be if we exclude non-R-ing gay men. I'd wager that it's in the 0.something range compared to the US male population. That would then leave us with the overwhelming likelihood that the male victimizing R is committed by a small number of R-ists. If we don't assume that and take on the worldview that 25% of all males are gay and bi R-ists, then additionally inserting the 1 out of 5 women number, which would be about 21% of the men in the US, what we are left with is this ridiculous notion that up to 36% of the male population in the US will need to be a type of R-ist, with more than half of them being gay or bi. How does that work? How does that fit in your worldview? It's almost as if there are a small number of horrible people in the world that victimize tons of people. The paper continues, quote, the evidence that a relatively small proportion of men are responsible for a large number of Rs and other interpersonal crimes may provide at least a partial answer to the oft-noted paradox, namely that while victimization surveys have established that a substantial proportion of women are S-victimized, relatively small percentages of men report committing acts of S-violence. In this sample of 1,882 men, 76 or 4% of the individuals were responsible for an estimated 439 R's and attempted R's. That is what men mean when they say we are not talking about Rists. These people are not the common population of men. They are nowhere near enough in number to justify fearing a completely random man in the woods. Let me give you an equivalent statement, and let's keep it in the realm of math. For now, wink wink, not all rectangles are squares, but all squares are rectangles. What that means is that even though squares share a characteristic with rectangles that makes them the same thing, rectangles don't share that characteristic with squares, meaning that rectangles cannot always be squares. Do you understand why a single immutable characteristic doesn't make them the same? I have an example coming up which will be so juicy and offensive, just you wait.
How these MFers feel after making all men feel like they are rapists.
Hey, bud? You see how these two things are not the same? Isn't it so cool how they are not the same?
Yes, that is true, they are not the same. But the whole point of the fear you exhibit towards men is the overwhelming likelihood that being a man means you must be an Rist. You can't say that mathematically speaking,
there must be a non-trivial amount of men committing this type of crime.
When referring to a 1 in 5 number, which insinuates at worst a 1 in 5 male likelihood of being a victimizer, and in the same breath say that not all men are Rists. And even if we ignore numbers, by definition, you must believe in your heart of hearts that men are incredibly likely to victimize you in order to pick a creature that would 100% of the time victimize you. I know you might be thinking, well, bears sometimes don't attack, but that is quite hypocritical. If we are picking the worst case scenario for men, we need to also pick the worst case scenario for the bear. And even if we don't do that, the point of the hypothetical is the public's understanding of bears, which is vicious, unfeeling monsters ready to give you the business.
Our brother is dead, and it's because of that monster.
I don't blame the bear, Kenai.
Regardless, the point that is made by the bear gang is that the bear will kill me instead of SA me, meaning that when weighing the effects of a chance encounter in the woods, a bear's attack is a lot more merciful than an R person's victimization. To each their own, I haven't been mauled by a bear yet, but I have pet a bear cub once. They are way too big.
But since we don't want men to feel bad about themselves, please tell us which ones women should avoid. Do they walk differently than other men? Talk differently? What kind of shoes do they wear?
It would be great to have some sort of way to identify R people. Oh wait, there's such a thing as the Sex Offenders Registry. That's pretty helpful when assessing men. But I get your point, you can't tell which person's which, in the same way that you can't tell if a person is diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. How much money are you willing to put on a random man being autistic? I can't imagine it would be a substantial amount of money, but who knows, you might hit it big if you choose right. I'm obviously building up to something. I highly doubt you would be confident in putting your life savings on a bet that a person would be diagnosed with autism, but as it turns out, you would have double the chances. I'll clear things up in a bit.
Look, imagine you're at a party. I know, just suspend your disbelief. Imagine you're at a party and somebody walks in with a bowl of M&Ms. Super lazy for a potluck, but whatever. Now imagine you knew that some of these M&Ms were poisoned. Would you take that risk? I mean, come on, they're not all poisoned. What are you, some kind of freak who prefers Skittles?
I'll get back to that analogy in a bit. Rest assured, it's a terrible analogy.
That's the position that women are put in whenever they interact with a man. They have to just put their hand in that bowl and hope for the best. So I'm as bad as any serial killers now. Aw, I'm sorry you came to that completely unrelated and self-centered conclusion. That must be really hard for you.
Wow, that is dismissive and rude. You make it very hard to take your side when you argue like this. I hope you realize that. Again, and I hate to repeat myself, the point of complaining about these assumptions is that when men hear women call their gender R people, men will feel like they are being targeted. Even if you say not you, but other men, all men are other men to each other. If I am not part of the conversation, I am by definition labeled as a potential R person until I make it known, and that is very hurtful. Now, you might think that it's completely fine to do so. Label and forget. Ensure your safety. I mean, women can't just talk to all men and find out if they are or are not R people, so painting them all with a brush is completely fine. Let me give you an example of what that looks like. You might not like it, but you brought us here. If a racist white person says black people are murderers that kill white people, then then that person references some statistic that reflects that, and a black person is offended by this insinuation, and then you proceed with,
"Aw, I'm sorry you came to that completely unrelated and self-centered conclusion. That must be really hard for you."
Not a good look. In general, if you can replace a group and find the statement grossly offensive, you might not want to use that statement. If you are offended by this example, remember, you are the one that is saying men should not be offended at an insinuation. If numbers are what we are using to make our judgments on complete strangers with immutable characteristics, then you are by definition emboldening people who do so with racist and harmful intent. No bad methods, only bad targets. There is one more example that is quite the doozy, one that is so unbelievably skewed against women, it's insane. Keep watching.
But don't feel too bad for him though, because if you make the mistake of defending pity parties like this one, you might just make yourself a target, like this minor running a Star Wars meme account who said that she would choose the man, and then was immediately overwhelmed by hordes of freaks commenting graphic descriptions of what they would do to her as a reward. Great job, fellas.
I'm not sure why you blurred the account, it's so easy to find. I was able to find out who it was without much trouble. I won't release the name of the victim just because FFB didn't do so, but if your goal was to keep this person anonymous, you should have probably not shown this example at all. Especially considering it doesn't really bolster your argument. Let me explain. This person made it clear that they changed their choice to bear after the barrage of comments they received. Quite thin-skinned, but this is the internet. Social media is not for everyone, and if you are underage, I can imagine you might be a lot more sensitive. That being said, they run a huge account of 240k followers, so the likelihood that they were not facing something similar before this is very unlikely. I'm not victim blaming, no one should be getting sexualized on the internet unless you have an OF. I mean, at that point you want to be sexualized because it means more money. But when you spend enough time online to garner this much success, you generally would be expected to have the internet armor you need. What I will say is that they seem to have taken it quite well and have been able to laugh about the whole situation. The thing that I didn't mention yet though is, why am I saying the pronoun they all the time? There is a reason. This person is trans. I'm not sure from what to what and I don't want to know, but that is a huge thing you didn't mention. How likely is it that a person will get victimized online for being publicly trans? In my view, I would say it's about 100%. They are not quiet about their gender identity either. It's in their bio. And thus, it's hard to separate the comments they got for taking men's side and the comments they got just for being trans. There's also no reference to them being underage in their bio. That was only revealed afterwards when they replied to the comments. So a person sexualizing them might have thought it could be a funny haha meme to a person who isn't vulnerable like children are. Regardless, it's not very good argumentation to omit information that might change the perception of your argumentation. I'm a wapper.
He's a wapper.
Thing is, this person has been held up as some sort of hero figure. A lot of people love this person for how empathetic they are, to the point of creating music video edits for them. But then you go to the comments and people are arguing about them being trans. So I don't know what caused the weird comments, but stating that you are sure they were targeted by men being creeps is disingenuous. Do better research next time. Proceed.
This is so dumb. If the man is my husband or dad, brother, best friend, he would kill himself protecting you. Not sure what kind of men you guys know. Interesting, irrelevant factoid, Helen. Too bad I don't get to choose your heroic family members and or friends in this scenario. For your information, the kind of men I know are frankly epic, and I love to hang out with them because they laugh at my jokes. But they're also just kind people who are sympathetic and understanding when I bring up women's issues, instead of blowing a blood vessel trying to defend their honor.
It is true that this person has cherry-picked good men for her argument, but thing is, you are also cherry-picking the bad apples, or cherries I guess, to make your argument. You are increasing the availability of bad men to a degree that allows you to unironically state a wild animal will be a better option. Keep watching, there's better arguments coming down the line.
I ain't never hit a woman violently. I ain't never put a violent hand on a woman. I ain't never assaulted a woman. No, none of that. Ever.
Wow, man, that's super cool. Should we throw a party? Should we invite the Dalai Lama?
Probably not the Dalai Lama. Probably a bad idea.
The hypothetical is, would you rather encounter the average adult human male in the woods when you are alone or a bear? No one said anything about serial killers. Nobody said anything about Jeffrey Dahmer. Stop changing the hypothetical.
Wrong. You were the one changing the hypothetical. The man in the forest could be any man, from the most dangerous, perverted sicko that's ever roamed the streets to a Ned Flanders-esque fatherly figure holding an impossibly delicious mug of hot chocolate.
No, that person's right. When arguing about why a man would be worse than a bear, the only way a man could be worse than a bear is if you are talking about these types of men. And the only way your logic makes sense, i.e. choose the bear every time, is if there is an abundance of bad men to the point where a random selection will more often than not lead to a bad man. Remember, you are choosing certain death over an uncertain one. A good comparison would be, would you rather encounter a random man in the woods or be dropped from a flying plane without a parachute? Remember the race example? If saying that a man is too likely to be dangerous based on stats you barely understand, then a racist individual claiming a black person is more likely to be violent based on stats that they barely understand is fair game. In other words, you are engaging in the same type of argumentation that people you disagree with, I hope, engage in. Certain death is a lot more reasonable to you than a hilariously low chance of meeting a bad man. How low are these chances? I'll let you know soon enough. A lot more numbers coming up.
I feel like I'm going insane.
You and me both, sister.
It's a random man or a random bear. So questions like, what if the man is nice? What if the man is me? What if I have a gun? What if the man is gay? What if the bear is gay? Are completely irrelevant. The bear is gay, though.
They are irrelevant, but remember that you are not wondering, but stating that the man is most likely going to be a bad person in order to make this choice. You are doing the same thing as these other people and making fun of them for doing what you are doing. That's pretty funny. Also, googling gay bears, all I could find was porn. There is no representation for gay ursines.
And that's what needs to stop.
Instead of trying to understand why women might feel unsafe around men, many men have decided that women are simply uninformed about the dangers of bear attacks and have taken it upon themselves to educate them.
The term uninformed is quite apt here, but not when it comes to bear attacks. Everyone is uninformed about this topic. Seemingly no one knows the damage a bear does to someone's body. If you are queasy, don't look this up, but if you are curious, check out Wes Perkins. And remember that he is alive in these images. In fact, these are screenshots from a video where he was talking to his son who was actually filming him. Wes, believe it or not, was trying to calm down his son during this encounter. If you looked up the face, try figuring out how he was able to talk. I have no clue how he did that. While we are on effed up faces, ladies, would you rather meet a man or a chimpanzee in the woods? If you choose chimpanzee, congratulations, you are wrong. Especially if your whole argument revolves around the intentions of the person you encounter. In fact, chimpanzees are a lot more vicious than men in every regard. Funnily enough, FFB ends up referencing some examples of horrible men. Talk about not cherry picking. Yet none of these men even come close to the damage that a chimp will do to you. Chimpanzees, by the way, will not kill you immediately. They are not doing this because they want food. They are doing this because they want to punish you. They will disfigure you in every sense and then leave you to live in your disfigured state, if you even make it out. Look up St. James Davis. And before you say hashtag not all chimps, the situation was caused by an uneven redistribution of cake, comrade. Would you trust a chimp not to rip your face, fingers, and dick off before a man? I mean, if a man is more likely to disfigure you than a chimp, then by all means, pick the species that is known for horrific, precise, and intelligent attacks. It's not instinct. They are smart enough to go for what you need. If they were just angry, they would attack any part of your body, but they specifically go for your most valued bits. Talk about a vicious victimizer. Chimps have min-maxed this category for decades.
My mom got mauled by a bear. Here's a book she wrote about it. Here's a better look. So even though the question's not really in good faith, probably, I have some experience with this question.
Just because women are answering a question in a way that makes you personally uncomfortable doesn't mean that the question was asked in bad faith. Now, after going over the details of his mother's injuries, which she thankfully survived, he concludes with this.
So if you're asked this question and you take more than a second to come up with the same species as your answer, then honestly, I'm grateful that you've lived such a privileged life that your answer is the bear.
Interesting.
I couldn't find a copy of this video to save my life, so I have no idea what he says in it. All I could find were replies that cut him off and said nothing intelligent. Upsettingly enough, people were mostly laughing at him and making vacuous claims instead of arguing his points.
Hey Amanda, my mom got mauled by a bear.
That's crazy, because I just talked to the bear's friends and they all said that he didn't do it.
Here's a book she wrote.
Your mom got attacked by a bear. A situation so unique, she wrote a book about it. A bear lives in the woods, so it belongs there. A strange man is in the woods. How do I know he didn't follow me there?
Hey Amanda, my mom got mauled by a bear. Here's a book she wrote about it.
I feel so bad. This man's mother got mauled by a bear for this. This man says in this video that if you're a woman and you said that you would choose a bear over a man, that is privilege.
Pro tip, if you think someone is so wrong that you don't need to argue against them, you will only empower the ones who believe them. People will get the sense that you are victimizing him instead of being so wrong that his arguments don't need responding to. Regardless, it seems to me that he deleted his video to save face because he makes a living on TikTok. I mean, he literally stated that TikTok probably saved his life in reference to an operation he desperately needed and could only afford through TikTok's ad revenue. When it comes to the video, I know that he mentions the details of the attack, which are found on Reddit as written by his mother. From what I could see, the only reason she survived was her resourcefulness and 2 dogs. Now, with that in mind, I'll assume that the dogs played a huge role in saving her life. Dogs are a great resource to have in the wild, although they generally are supposed to know the bear was coming. So I have no idea why Fido and Old Yeller were slacking that day. The likelihood that she would have survived if the dogs didn't show up is pretty low. Dogs are known to scare off bears. Now, he specifically states same species as your answer, meaning that he is relating the damage to the interspecies dynamic rather than what the person would do. Honestly, I have no idea what else he says, and I am only speculating here. Feel free to send me a copy if you have one, but for now, I would agree that picking the same species is only logical. If you had to fight off a bear or a man, as a woman, it's pretty clear one gives you a lot more of a chance than the other. What's the likelihood that a human could fight off a bear? Pretty nil. I'd say we'd all take the L on that one. Now, what is the likelihood that a woman could fight off a man? I mean, it's not impossible. Hell, if you take self-defense or martial arts classes, you have a great shot at defending yourself against almost any man. So, take them. Men have easily targetable weak points. Ugh. I mean, would Ronda Rousey choose the bear? She'd need to be brain dead to do that because worst case scenario, she taps out the dude in seconds. Whereas if she could put a bear in an armbar, I don't think she would have retired after trying to take on Amanda Nunes by attempting to outstrike her. Beyond that, he says
privilege life,
which tips the scales. To me, it seems like he is relating privilege to not having to fight a bear, unlike his mother. I'd say that's quite the privilege to the average human being out there. Either that, or he is trying to say that if you never had to fight another human, you have no idea what you can and can't do when your life is at risk. Again, purely speculating here. I have no idea what he said, so I'm not sure what the objection is.
I wonder, would you call Junka Furuta privileged? How about 12-year-old Kimberly Leach? Was she privileged?
Talk about hypocrisy. You're telling men not to pick different edits to the hypothetical that change the outcome, meanwhile you're over here referencing some of the worst men in history to prove the point that men are awful. And women will face a similar fate to these victims if they choose men instead of bears. I mean, seriously, how do victims of horrific crimes even relate to this hypothetical? I know it sounds silly to say that, but referencing serial killers and our people in your argument would be equivalent to referencing pet bears that would help you get your workout in. What is the difference between these two? I mean, nice docile pet bears are quite rare, definitely comparable to the worst cases of targeted modern human atrocities. Yet, what is the likelihood that you would get one of these men? Probably similar to getting one of these bears. I'd say it's quite low. Yes, these women and girls were victims of horrific crimes, no question about it, but how does that relate to the average man? In what sense other than they are both men? Allowing the tiniest minority of a group to color the whole group is quite problematic. Remember the crime statistics? Why is it okay for women to say bad men are too common based on stats? I barely understand, but not okay for another person to say I will avoid X race because of stats I barely understand. I have been dancing around this point for a bit, but I will make it here. There is a clear double standard when it comes to judging men as a group. There is no damage that can be done to men when you prejudge them, but prejudging minorities, that is a hate crime. I stand here before you to say, no more prejudging, it causes mental anguish.
You know what? I think I'm gonna have to read your mom's book because the details just really aren't adding up for me. You see, I know that bear. It's a good friend of mine, and it's never attacked me. I mean, what was your mom wearing? Are you sure she didn't want the bear to attack her?
This is an R apologist argument. What was she wearing? That was a bit unwarranted, however, since no one you've referenced in this video so far has made the point that a woman should get SA'd if she is dressed a certain way. Where did this come from? Why are you talking about this? Why did you bring it up? You brought up that point, not anyone else online relating to the man-bear question. If you hate that point, why give it breath? It makes sense to argue against it if someone is using it for argument's sake, but no one you've shown in your video so far has done that. Even if you think that it must exist somewhere, remember that FFB would jump at the opportunity to show that in her video. But no, she had to bring it up. And why did she bring it up? Because it's a generally accepted position regardless of what you wear. It's not a carte blanche to go ahead and get busy. It's a tactic, regardless if she did it consciously or unconsciously. If you mention a commonly accepted argument that barely relates to the original discourse, audiences will believe that a point's been made. In other words, it's a red herring fallacy. Here's an example I found online. There are criminals out there, and you are wasting time on me when giving a speeding ticket. This is a red herring fallacy because it diverts the issue from your speeding to crime in general. It attempts to trivialize your own wrongdoing by highlighting other unrelated problems. I don't think it's important for me to explain why logical fallacies are bad argumentation, but here we are. Please don't do this. It's not helpful.
It don't sound like that lady wanted to choose the bear. It sounded like she wanted to choose the man instead.
Whoa, wait. You're telling me that bears are apex predators? That they're not cuddly rainbow friends that solve problems with the magic of kindness? That they don't make marmalade sandwiches and talk in British accents? Gulp. What am I gonna do now?
Fellas, would you rather be stuck in the woods with a woman or a bear? Let me know, because I think, you know what? I think I would rather choose the bear, because at least with the bear's not gonna just date me for my money and in the divorce take half my stuff or more.
The worst possible thing you could think of a woman doing to you is dipping into your bank account, dude?
I just included this whole part for continuity's sake. Nothing important is said here, and I agree that this dude is reaching. That being said, the reason men mention the money point is because if there's one thing that modern men online agree on, it's that women value money over personality. And brain rot content does reflect that.
In the home of rich men now, we're in Mayfair. Excuse me, are you guys rich and looking for a wife at all?
I'm already married.
Oh, can you have like another wife?
What do you want? You want a rich husband?
Yeah. I like your watch.
Thank you. Thank you. I got a little money, but
50% of it. Better than my ex.
Yeah. Oh yeah? Wow. I love it. I love it. I hope you find a rich husband.
Women being gold diggers is a point that would resonate with a lot of modern men. These dudes don't choose the bear because bear will not steal their money. These dudes choose the bear and give reasons why women suck in their view. The bear is just there to keep in theme. Really is just a veiled criticism of women. So no, it's not because women couldn't do worse than dip into their bank account. It's because women today are commonly criticized for valuing money before anything else. Thus, they bring up the commonly accepted argument to resonate with their bros.
I've seen so many men try to reverse the bear versus man hypothetical to air out their petty grievances with women, only to inadvertently reveal what a different reality they live in, largely unaffected by the day-to-day precautions women must take for their own safety. I shouldn't have to say this, but being nagged or your ex-wife boinking your buddies is not comparable to being attacked by a bear.
It's funny that you make fun of men who choose the bear instead of emotional pain and then state it as if it's a common logical conclusion that men shouldn't choose to die and instead deal with the terrible women they've had in the past. Isn't that literally the same reason you called out Alec Newman? Calling women privileged for getting assaulted by a man instead of eaten by a bear? Think about it. You just said that you should choose the woman because what they do you is trivial and less harmful compared to the bear. That is without a doubt a complete minimizing of someone's experience. You do realize that, right? Please tell me you realize that what you are doing right now.
I shouldn't have to say this, but being nagged or your ex-wife boinking your buddies is not comparable to being attacked by a bear.
Telling men that your experiences with women are petty grievances that are not worse than being eaten by a bear is the exact same as when you called out Alec Newman for what he said. When you cited female victims of the worst men in modern history, you asked if they were privileged to not have to deal with the bear. Now you are saying that these men are petty and that they are privileged to have dealt with bad women in the past, regardless of their experiences, and that the bear would have been a much worse outcome. I love it. Just a complete 180 on your principles. Your video is quite horrible. Please redraft your work, check your script. You haven't made a single valid point so far. Now, who is to say what that nagging was? According to that man, it was so bad he'd rather die. Now, I'll give you the benefit of the doubt and say that nagging doesn't warrant unaliving, although I wouldn't tell a person that their reasons for their depression is trivial because it's extremely harmful. But the next example is a bit more extreme. It's not on screen long enough, and FFB plays it off as a joke, as if boinking your buddies is a trivial thing.
Your ex-wife boinking your buddies?
How is that not the same as what you argued against before? I'm not sure. The TikTok reads, bear. A bear will only eat me. It won't screw my buddies while I'm at work, then come home and tell me it loves me. It won't use me for what I can provide. It won't shred my perception of love to the point I can't hold a stable talking stage at the least. I can't believe you read this and then just summed it up as lol boinking your buddies. It is quite clear that this person is opening up about a deeply traumatic experience that caused him lasting damage, and considering the bias in divorce courts, might still be hurting him directly. This man is stating without the shadow of a doubt that he has been mentally scarred for life and will likely never be able to love or make friends again. And I don't know about you, but similar to how some people would rather die to a bear than get SA'd by a man, some people would rather die than see what they believe to be a loving relationship go down in flames at the hand of your supposed lover. You can't tell people that their emotional pain is trivial and not as real as their physical pain. That is gross and, honestly, quite privileged. This person socially has nothing left and will find it very hard to be vulnerable again. It's so hilariously hypocritical and callous to hear you dismiss that. You need to remember, the bear in this hypothetical is certain death, and some people will choose death no matter how painful, way before they choose emotional pain, especially when they know what deep emotional pain feels like. How incredibly disgusting on your part. You have just, without a shadow of a doubt, ruined your credibility when it comes to this argument and any argument that relates to trauma. When you label someone as petty when they are specifically outlining their endless pit of despair and solitude at the hands of their most trusted individuals, then I have to quote Alec Newman, "I'm grateful that you've lived such a privileged life that your answer is the bear. If you can't recognize when someone is saying I'm at the end of my emotional tether, then you haven't reached the emotional maturity needed to even think about this topic. You clearly hold men and women at different standards. You believe that a woman's trauma is much more important to worry about than a man's trauma. The fact that you would jump to defend women's issues without a shred of skepticism, while simultaneously dismissing men's issues when spelled out as clear as can be without the smallest amount of empathy, is quite telling. You, FunkyFrogBait, or whatever your name is, are sexist. You are one of the most unabashedly sexist individuals on this site. I know that the term sexist has been memed to death, but I ask you to treat the word as the harsh accusation that it is. Being a sexist is no laughing matter. Sexism causes real issues regardless of who it is directed to and where it stems from. So congratulations on earning your place next to all these people you so sorely hate. A caveat, by the way, I know that the TikTok that the men made were also specific examples. My point isn't that those specific examples now clear up the fact, I guess, that women are horrible people and you should choose bear. No. My point is that she dismisses when people say things, not that we need to choose women or bears in this scenario, because that hypothetical doesn't really exist. So just keep that in mind. Now, how do I keep making jokes in this video after cooking her this hard?
I think this comment is the perfect response to all the bear-splaining. Worst case scenario, the bear would just kill me.
Are you f***ing kidding me? How is that in any way disconnected to the previous people's issues? The bear will just kill me is what the punchy princess said. Yes, that's his real account name. Go show him some love. The dude deserves better from life. Yet, even though he said the same thing in relation to what he had faced in the past, you dismiss his experience and highlight someone else's? What is wrong with you?
Choosing the bear over the man comes down to a very logical comparison of possible outcomes.
Really? Are we doing this right now? You want to bring logic? Alright, finish your point, and let's show you how wrong you are.
The bear is an animal operating off of instinct. You've invaded its home, and if it responds with aggression, it's doing so to either defend or feed itself.
I agree, that is what bears are, and that's what they do. There's nothing to argue with here, it's completely logical.
A man, however, is capable of prolonged, excruciating, and degrading forms of torture requiring a level of creativity and hatred that an animal simply could not comprehend. The man understands your screams for help, knows what he's doing is wrong, but continues anyways, not out of necessity, but pleasure. It's that situation that is so horrifying that women would choose being mauled to death by a bear to avoid it.
When you argue that cruelty and evil comes strictly from the male side of the gender dichotomy, it alienates a large chunk of your audience. The reason being, you are telling your audience that torture and humiliation is a purely male-centric desire, instead of the reality that torture and humiliation are ancient human desires that have died out a long time ago. It doesn't matter if it still happens. The types of people who want to torture and humiliate are so small and insubstantial in number that calling humanity an empathetic and tolerant species is somehow less hyperbolic. The closest thing I can cite is the rates of ASPD, where 6% of men and 2% of women meet the criteria of this diagnosis according to the DSM-5. Yes, men are 3 times more likely to get diagnosed with ASPD, but that is equivalent to saying that you doubled your sales at Dunder Mifflin Paper Company by going from 1 sale to 2 sales.
And I doubled my sales last month.
Oh, really? From what, 2 to 4?
Yup.
And remember, ASPD doesn't mean a desire to torture necessarily, but rather a lack of care when it comes to other individuals' rights and feelings. That means that the prevalence of men and women who would want to and proceed in torturing individuals will be vastly smaller. There's a reason why Peter Nguyen, the man and judge that sentenced the 3 criminals to life in prison, said, "Never in Hong Kong in recent years has a court heard of such cruelty, depravity, callousness, brutality, violence, and viciousness," when referring to the Hello Kitty murder, the example you showed next to you. There is a reason why murder cases like these spawn movies and TV shows. There is a reason why the Hello Kitty murder case spawned movies to tell the story. If men were the type to do this on the regular, as you are not so subtly hinting, then stories like these would be so mundane no one would remember the cases. You are referencing them because they are rare and horrific, not because they are prevalent and mundane. Otherwise, it would be a completely different story. Therefore, choosing certain deaths based on select cases is illogical. It's called the availability heuristic. I actually made a video that referenced this phenomenon in the past, but related it to storytelling. Check it out.
Though what both men and women don't know is that it's actually the crystallized honey epidemic ravaging local bear populations that they should be worried about.
Again, kept this for continuity, nothing to say here.
As often happens in these situations, men have suddenly decided to elevate a concern that they seem to only be interested in when it serves to silence discussions of women's safety. That is, of course, male victims of female perpetrators.
Yikes! I wouldn't dare claim that someone doesn't care about an issue and uses tactics to silence a similar issue. That is a very bold and harmful claim that better be true if you're making it. For example, I called you sexist based on your dismissal of men's claims as petty grievances, and your double standard when it comes to the issue of choosing death over pain as it links to men. What is quite funny is that by following your claim that men's issues are only brought up when they lead to silencing women's issues, you are inadvertently dismissing men's issues. Basically, you are calling men's issues a weapon aimed at women's issues when women's issues become too loud for men's liking, meaning that men's issues are only as useful to them as long as they serve a retaliatory purpose. You can't make that shit up. She's doing the same thing in reverse and calling it a conspiracy, instead of the most likely and simplest explanation that men and women who fight for this issue have done so consistently, and only now they can be seen more clearly because of the virality of the man v bear debate. I can't find the original TikTok mention, the account is not there for some reason, but I find it interesting that you didn't mention all the harassment that this woman, as self-described in her description, received.
Flashback.
If you make the mistake of defending pity parties like this one, you might just make yourself a target.
I mean, she must have. That's how TikTok works. You made it clear that men do that, so where are all the sexualizing comments? There are 69 of them. Why didn't you mention them?
I accidentally tasted the marker. Alright guys, let's make a circle representing all men and a circle representing all women. Haha, boobs. I'm trying, guys. I'm really trying. Now let's make another circle in red representing, well, you get the idea. You see how a lot of that circle is on the men's side? Not all, because you can still believe and support male victims while acknowledging the basic reality that an overwhelming majority of people who commit this type of abuse are men.
Finally, the graph. I can finally bust out my circle graph I made for this video, although mine is made with numbers and yours is made with, I don't know, a gut feeling. To make this graph as charitable as possible, I decided to look up the numbers of RAPE from 2012 to 2019 from the FBI because that's the most reliable source I could find. Adding all the numbers of male perpetrators, whether forcible or non-forcible, I got 636,259 known male offenders. Now adding the unknown male offenders and dividing it by 2, considering the distribution of the population, we get 645,276.5 male perpetrators, and we rounded up to 645,277. Now, to account for the non-reported cases, I decided to multiply it by 3 just to keep it as charitable as possible, which means that we get a final approximate number of 2 million male perpetrators. And I hope you realize how charitable I've been with these numbers. If you don't, I'll explain why in a second. Even with this massive number, 2 million means 1.22% of the male population. Therefore, if we were to plot it on a graph, where the big blue circle is all males, the male perpetrators, even with the most charitable estimates, would amount to this circle. Huh? Remember your M&M's example?
Flashback.
Look, imagine you're at a party. I know, just suspend your disbelief. Imagine you're at a party and somebody walks in with a bowl of M&M's. Super lazy for a potluck, but whatever. Now imagine you knew that some of these M&M's were poisoned. Would you take that risk? I mean, come on, they're not all poisoned. What are you, some kind of freak who prefers Skittles?
This puts it to shame. It's not even close to similar. It's more like, what is the chance that one of the millions of M&M bags you could purchase has one M&M inside of it that is deformed? And that is if we multiply the number by 3. If we go with the numbers we have, it amounts to 0.39%, which looks like this. And the reason 0.39 is very charitable even when not multiplied by 3 is because we are completely ignoring several factors, those being the sex of the victim, a pretty huge point to your argument that men assault women, because if the majority of the circle is taken up by males that are females, then your argument falls apart. Beyond that, we are not accounting for the lifespan of the artist, the number of victims one would have, the location of the crime, the relationship they had to the victim, false accusations that lead some men to be sentenced for decades before they are proven innocent, and most importantly, the type of the crime. I held off mentioning this to this point, but these numbers relate to sex offenders, not strictly the number of arrests. According to the mandatory minimum penalties of sex offenders, 72.4% of the cases in 2010 have been CP cases, and as the technology keeps on improving, we can only assume that this number has gone up. What this means is that the overwhelming majority of sex crimes is related specifically to child ownership and or distribution, not R. Does that make it better? No, it sucks so much and I hate it, but when it comes to the man v bear debate, this should put it into perspective. If we go back to the circle graph and plot the number of sex offenders, excluding the majority of degenerates, we get this. See the outer side of the circle? The parts in white? This is the pool that you are fearing. And remember, this is the generous estimate of 1.22. If we instead use the number we have of 0.39, we end up with this example that I can't really illustrate because the stroke is getting in the way. But instead of keeping it that way, I made the 0.39 circle without CP asshats, and we get this circle. In other words, when making a decision where the first outcome is definite death and the second outcome is between 98.78% and 99.61% likely to not be an arrest, choosing death is kinda silly. And remember, these are numbers including the fact that the majority of sex offenders are just dickheads who own and distribute CP, meaning that the numbers excluding them, and only them because there are more crimes that are not related to SA, like indecent exposure for example, the percentages of not likely meeting an arrest is 99.117% at the most charitable, and 99.718% given the numbers we have. If I were to go into the weeds some more and exclude the likelihood of meeting an S offender that isn't an arrest, we'd be getting to numbers that are so absurdly specific that start with 99. So I ask you, you. If you were 99% likely to win the lottery, why not buy a ticket? Is it because not buying a lottery ticket ensures the outcome? Good for you. The people who will win the lottery ticket will win 99% of the time, and you can enjoy not having the money you needed for the life-saving operation you need. Now, because I did my due diligence, I also calculated the female side of the numbers. I didn't go into as much detail because it doesn't matter to the overall point of FFB's video or the man v bear question, but I did calculate the numbers we need. What I found is that taking the numbers at face value, female sex offenders amount to 50,605 after rounding up, which translates to 0.03% of the US female population, and multiplying it by 3 to account for non-reported incidents gives us 0.883% of the female population. Interestingly enough, 645,277, which is the approximate number of male offenders, is 92.1% higher than 50,605, the approximate number of female offenders. That reflects the 93.6 from the quick facts on sexual abuse offenders from the USSC, or 92 that FFB referenced beforehand. So we know that these approximations are very close to the real life number we would find. The differences would be so minute that you can use my numbers with confidence even if they are not exact. It's not my fault that the US doesn't have an approximation on the amount of male sex offenders they have, yet for some reason they have an approximation of how many of them are US citizens, their average age for some reason, and their race. Talk about false priorities. It's almost like they're trying to paint a narrative. Although looking at the numbers I can see why. If you want to drum up controversy and fear in order to increase funding, showing how small and insignificant the numbers of sex offenders are would probably make it seem like the US is wasting money on worthless nobodies. These are the numbers that you need to take into account. These are the numbers that let you know how safe you really are in the US. And I hear you, you are saying, but what about murderers? Those numbers are way higher. And that is correct. Murders are a lot more numerous, and men account for the majority of homicide victims. That being said, the reason women choose bear is because the bear will, and I quote,
just kill me.
Therefore, a murderer's actions, according to you, are completely acceptable. Good for you.
Isn't it crazy how you can care about both these things at the same time? For any man out there who has been victimized by a woman, I wish nothing but healing for you. But men and little boys aren't considered spoils of war for women to violate by the millions after achieving victory in a conflict instigated and carried out by women.
I'm gonna let Harry Crouch take this.
Matter of fact, in war, if you actually go on the internet and do your homework, what you'll find is it's very common that a vanquishing army will come in, the first people that rape is the men. But women can rape a man, and they do. They're actually, in Kenya, they actually have roving groups of women going around raping men.
Now, men have been massively overrepresented in the military ever since humanity started building militaries. Therefore, women weren't given the chance to engage in such depravity at the same level. And regardless, even when women do fight, they are not the ones on the front lines, meaning they are not the ones that siege the castle, per se. Who knows what women would do if they were the ones to do that? Oh, wait, we do have an example. The Agoje, an all-female unit that fought for the Dahomey. Remember the Woman King? That totally accurate movie that respected historical facts. If you just watched the film, you would be getting a completely sterilized and cleaned up version of history. Watch my video on historical lies in media to know why that is damaging. In reality, the Agoje, more often than not, sold people into slavery, fought against Europeans who were attempting to end the slave trade, forced women to become fighters and wives to the king, sacrificed people by cutting their heads off, and cherry on top, ard to their heart's content. Children included.
Walk straight up to a kid and be like, "You, little boy, I will be using you tonight."
Carl.
See, Jay, you think I'm fucking joking? That's what they actually did.
I know, but still.
This entire empire was born on slavery and Stockholm Syndrome, and we're not about to stop now.
The Dahomey were incredibly brutal and unfeeling soldiers that were made to be so. Therefore, even though men are overrepresented in a statistic because they are the ones that are overrepresented in the military, doesn't mean that women who are allowed to fight on the front lines wouldn't end up showing similar behaviors.
There are no countries where little boys are habitually married off to aging women collecting young males for their harems.
You are misrepresenting the data there. It specifically specifically mentions underage female marriages and not underage female marriages to older people, so assuming that these numbers reflect your point is irresponsible and bad data science. Either way, here's a study called Child Marriages Among Boys, a global overview of the available data. What this study found is that underage boys being married off is not an insignificant number. To use the NSVRC approach, 1 in 21 males aged 20 to 24 were first married or in union before age 18. The article makes it clear that girls suffer this at a higher rate, which means by design women are married off to older men more often, but to claim that there are no countries where little boys are married off is a lie. Please do your research. Another study states that 115 million boys and men around the world were married as children. Now, does that mean that they are all married to older women? No, and either way, I don't think it's important to highlight varieties when it comes to the awful tradition of child marriage. Just like not all boys would have been married off to older women, not all girls would have been married off to older men. Quick anecdote, I know a person from a third world country whose grandfather was married to his grandmother when they were both 14 and 13 respectively. It's a horrific state of affairs and that should never happen. Discrediting real issues to bolster other issues is something you frowned upon earlier, but I guess when you do it, it's completely fine. I checked Statista by the way, and they didn't mention the age of the males marrying the girls, nor did they mention the existence of young boys who are being married to the same people, meaning that in a lot of these cases, the males could be the same age as the females that are being married off. Do better research.
There are no places where men are advised to only travel with a female chaperone lest they be attacked in the night by dangerous women.
Well, ignoring the fact that the majority of assaults are men, yes, women shouldn't walk alone at night. Neither should men. No one should do that unless you want to get attacked. Making it a women-centric issue both doesn't reflect the data and completely invalidates real people's experiences. Something you said was a bad thing. The hypocrisy meter quit from working overtime.
There isn't legislation for digital cameras and smartphones to make an audible shutter noise when taking a picture because women just couldn't stop themselves from taking pictures down men's pants on public transportation.
Interestingly enough, 86.2 of the 3,476 Korean people surveyed that they would prefer to change the audio setting. Could have to do with the 60 to 68 decibel range that the camera needs to be by law. That's quite loud and annoying. Personally, I think it's completely fine to keep this regulation. Now, whether or not women ever do take creep shots of men is not important. Creep shots are gross and you should be prosecuted for them. But let's not pretend like it's a man thing.
Here we go.
Women just couldn't stop themselves from taking pictures down men's pants on public transportation.
And if your immediate reaction to these videos is that these men were doing this to get attention and make a video out of it, remember that men cannot control the size of their crotches without immense discomfort. Some men have bigger crotches by design, and telling them to dress differently is eerily reminiscent of what women lobby against when they are told what was she wearing.
I mean, what was your mom wearing?
Remember, the original intentions of the creator don't matter when it comes to the results. We now know,
mathematically speaking,
there must be a significant number of women out there who will stare at an unsuspecting man for looking a certain way, and some will proceed to take creep shots uninvited.
I am enthusiastically in support of any awareness raised for male victims that challenges the patriarchal demand that men stoically suffer their trauma in silence. Baby Reindeer is a recent piece of media that does an excellent job of this.
Is that so? Doesn't explain your reaction to men's complaints in the earlier examples where they preferred death over deep emotional pain, now does it?
Ex-wife boinking your buddies? is not comparable to being attacked by a bear.
You specifically disregarded and trivialized their trauma. Therefore, I apologize for not being able to take your words at face value based on your behavior. Remember, if you can't change the sex or race or any immutable characteristic that a person has without disagreeing with yourself, you just might be arguing in bad faith.
But if you're someone who only mentions their experiences or the experiences of others to weaponize against women, I have to question your motivations.
As I stated earlier, I wouldn't dare claim that someone doesn't care about an issue and uses tactics to silence a similar issue. That is a very bold and harmful claim that better be true if you are making it. I also said, basically you are calling men's issues a weapon aimed at women's issues when women's issues become too loud for men's liking, meaning that men's issues are only as useful to them as long as they serve a retaliatory purpose. You can't make that shit up. She is doing the same thing in reverse and calling it a conspiracy, instead of the most likely and simplest explanation that men and women who fight for this issue have done so consistently, and only now they can be seen more clearly because of the virality of the man v bear debate. I rest my case.
A lot of people have been saying that this hypothetical was only created to make men look bad and stoke unnecessary controversy, which is a convenient thing to believe if you are unaffected by the reality represented by the hypothetical.
The reality of the hypothetical is not at all what you've showcased so far. The reality of the hypothetical actually makes people who choose the bear seem like ideologues who were spoon-fed a version of reality instead of the actual truth that over 99% of men in the US are not in any way going to SA you at any point in your life. If I may say so myself, it is very convenient that your version of reality puts men in a box to be avoided at all costs, and it's very convenient that institutions that spread this misinformation benefit greatly, where in 2020 women's and girls' issues received $8.8 billion in donations alone during an economic drought due to job losses and businesses closing. That is excluding funding from government bodies and government-run organizations that do the same thing. A billion-dollar industry running on charitable donations will feel quite the blow if their donations were to recede, and thus out of necessity they will keep on repeating unidentifiable claims and bad data science instead of giving the people a full picture. Otherwise, they will get less money.
I'm sure back in the day when men would come home from work and their wives were yapping about having the right to vote, they would have preferred their steak dinner be uninterrupted by such divisive ideas. In response to realizing just how afraid women are of being attacked by men, men have done everything in their power over the past few weeks to reassure them that they made the right choice. For instance, drawing graphic images of women being torn apart by bears.
There's nothing really to argue against here. People who drew these things didn't do them in good taste. But if I were to describe why that happened, it would be to remind women what bears do. I would assume that these men felt attacked because in their minds bears are so dangerous that there is no way any man could compare. But that isn't necessarily true. The worst men, you know, about 0.3% at the most charitable estimate, would be quite horrific monsters who will do horrible things to everyone given the chance. But when their rarity is laughably high, pretending that it isn't is in equally bad taste, if not more so, because drawing the reality of bear attacks informs the reality of bears and insults the women that choose them for being so naive of what bears are, while assuming an overwhelming prevalence of horrific men out there, labels men as violent, aggressive monsters and rejects their humanity. Remember the race example? Remember that, FFB? Is it wrong to label black people as violent? Hashtag not all is completely fine then, I guess. And based on your approach to statistics and logic, you should be able to see eye to eye with the likes of Dr. Samuel Green.
Posting videos of bears eating their prey and joking about it being a woman instead. Making up scenarios where they're armed and capable of defending a woman from a bear, but choose not to punish her for being a feminist, using a clip of Pedro Pascal of all people. How dare you invoke his image in vain?
All I have to say is,
welcome to the internet.
Also, I don't like Pedro Pascal. Give other actors a chance. Stop putting him in everything.
Slippery skin. This unknown entity has been spotted in many places, with recent sightings primarily in the forest. Further research has shown that slippery skin is likely to attack people who would rather encounter a bear than a man in the woods. To increase your chances of safety, we advise against expressing such preferences near forested areas.
Your response to women saying that they would feel unsafe alone in the woods with a strange man was to make an AI-generated video of a monster that hunts them down. Wow, how very cool and normal of you. You definitely seem like the type of guy a woman would feel safe in the woods with.
If you only did a teeny tiny bit more research, you would find out that the slippery skin video was made by a channel called CryptidAffairs. This channel makes videos of all types of cryptids that target all manner of people, like this one that targets anyone who's alone at night.
The tall ones. Their presence is often not made aware until it is too late, making them particularly dangerous at night or in isolated trails. The encounters usually take place when the individuals are alone. Those who inadvertently venture too close are rarely heard from again, and disappearances are attributed to these encounters. For your safety, avoid walking alone in poorly lit or isolated areas. This has been a public service announcement from CryptidAffairs.
This cryptid only targets children.
The anti-poo. It has shown that the anti-poo influences their child with dark whispers, urging them to commit terrible acts. In other cases, children venture into the woods behind their house, following the sound of a familiar, comforting voice. Evidence has shown that it lures them into a child's playroom that becomes a portal to a dark, twisted version of the 100-acre wood, where the anti-poo reigns supreme.
Also, this cryptid.
Drake's snake. Drake's snake primarily targets children in particular.
Now, I will not pretend that the slippery skin video wasn't intended to insult women, it could be, but this account wasn't made in response to the man versus bear debate. Rather, it was made to create a fantasy organization that gives information on horrors that are not real. It's very much inspired by the SCP written forums. It's only natural that he would make a video on slippery skin after the man v bear debate became so huge. Yes, you heard me right, slippery skin was not created by CryptidAffairs. That creature was a part of folklore since the 1700s. Furthermore, this wasn't at all his first venture into AI-generated horror creatures.
The Putnam Pigman.
If you're into creepy stuff, his AI video skills are pretty decent. Give them a look. I mean, they have several videos relating to drain babies in relation to men's ejaculate being flushed down the toilet. Drain babies are attracted to male scents and are aggressive and unbeatable. Are they threatening men who jerk off? Based on your conclusions and using your methodology, this person hates men, women, and children. Or is it just as likely that they are looking for popular discussions like stopping men from masturbating and taking them to insane extremes? I'm not sure, but their videos are fun. Also, apparently, the government is going to use drain babies to lure in Drake Snake. Tune in next week for the next exciting episode where drain babies and Drake Snake team up to take down humanity.
What men are out there saying how much they want to be violent with women who pick the bear?
As it turns out, a lot of them. Here's some fun examples. In response to a woman saying she would choose the bear, thanks, I'm into so I'll to yours. Or this one that digs a real stinker out of the old 4chan lexicon. Foyd, when I am done with you, you will beg for the bear.
Welcome to the internet. Come and take a seat.
I love how there is just a plethora of derogatory terms specifically for women, but incels still had to rub their greasy little noggins together to come up with a spicy new slur.
You know how feminist became a derogatory label used to discredit people who argue for women's issues? Do you not see that incel is the same thing in reverse? Do you not see how you're doing the same thing they are doing? Do you not see how using the word incel so liberally has led to the complete diluting of the word? Do you not see how incel once meant a violent, angry virgin? Do you not see how it has shifted into a person I disagree with? Do you not see the perfect example I've used 6 times in the past few seconds that has also led to the dilution of its term, and now when you call an actual person that term, no one believes you? Do you not see that? Do you not see how feminist is now synonymous with angry, fat, blue-haired woman and emasculated, self-hating, potentially dangerous towards women type men? Do you not see how you can't call yourself an advocate for women's rights anymore because of labeling? Do you not see the harm that you've done to discourse by sticking to the tactic of label and forget? Rules for thee and not for me.
But don't worry, ladies. I'll protect you.
Okay.
I guess when it comes down to it, I'm just shocked that men disagree so strongly with women's answer to the bear versus man hypothetical, because from my perspective, Men are constantly announcing to the world how dangerous they are. Last time I checked, women haven't been the ones to dominate directors' chairs in Hollywood, yet the media I've been fed my whole life has been full of dads with shotguns, repressed nerds committing crimes under the guise of harmless pranks, and suave protagonists forcing themselves on young girls. I thought we were all on the same page here.
I don't know what movies these are, and I don't agree with your description of these scenes. You need to source your data and give us clear descriptions of what happens if you want to reference a movie. And excuse me for not completely agreeing with you off the get-go, but unfortunately my video stands as a clear and informative representation of how much you deceive your audience with data that doesn't fit your narrative, and how uninformed you are about these topics. I'm sorry, but if you are going to use movies for your proof as to what men think of themselves, then it would be pretty hard to be conclusive based on such a small sample size and limited scope. And even if you reference every single film ever, you need to remember that movies aren't written by all men. They are written by a select tiny minority of men and women who pursued this job and were able to make it in a ruthless and cutthroat industry. Seems to me like a successful movie industry veteran would have some dark triad traits, to the point where it's not just limited to the movie industry. This approach to data completely erases the overwhelming majority of men that don't make it in big businesses and the ones that don't even try. You remember the small circles? If I were to plot the number of men in screenwriter roles, it would be so small that you'd need a microscope to see the men who made it into the industry. It wouldn't even be a pixel. So using this tiny circle to define how men see themselves is quite presumptuous and dumb. Get better arguments.
Try this fun social experiment. Tell a man in your life that you think Game of Thrones would have been better without the graphic violence. Watch him combust, insisting that the historical integrity of the show about dragons would be destroyed if he wasn't allowed to watch conventionally attractive actresses stripped and acts of brutality simulated on them from the comfort of his living room.
I haven't seen Game of Thrones and probably never will. I've never discussed it with anyone and I have no idea what happens in the show. But allow me to make a bold statement. Correct me if I'm wrong, but wouldn't the women who face the S-violence in the show be generally characters with names and arcs? Are these women who face this type of abuse not shown to be victims that work past their abuse and overcome it? This changes the S-violence from purely for pornographic reasons to storytelling reasons, giving these women a reason to be broken down and then have them overcome their shortcomings and become dominant in the hierarchy, from victim to leader, from injured to empowered. Tell me if I'm wrong, I haven't seen the show, but if that generally happens, then it's pretty clear that the show had more to say than, "Don't you like this scene? It's made for men." Also, if I remember correctly, don't a lot of men get brutally murdered and tortured in Game of Thrones? I know the Mountain crushed a dude's skull or gouged out his eyes or something, right? Was that made to fulfill a man's fantasy of what, getting dominated by a 6'9" strongman? I know the show is beloved except for season 8 for some burning hot reason. And so dismissing the fans of the show this way is quite an insult. Good on you, FFB, dismiss the people who disagree with you. That's how argumentation works after all.
As someone who's been playing video games since these were still popular, I've always been painfully aware of how men will do anything they can to make women feel unsafe in a space they feel belongs to them. It's a well-documented phenomenon that women who dare to impede on this territory are constantly subjected to dehumanizing threats.
Oh, be honest with me. Do you know what feels like?
No, I don't actually.
Well, do you want to know?
Are you saying you're gonna me?
It's not if I like it.
Welcome to the internet. Hold on to your socks.
You're really going to bring up the bully hunters argument? Millions of women quit gaming because of harassment. In reality, their numbers were completely false, extrapolating data that completely muddles the water when it comes to facts, and is ultimately lying to the entire population. Why am I bringing up the bully hunters? Well, because they are the most major example that made the point that FFB made.
It's a well-documented phenomenon.
Thing is, it only takes a little bit of research to find out that men are harassed a lot more than women in video games, according to Pew Research. Yes, women face more specific types of harassment, but men receive the majority of harassment as a whole, because online games like these Valorant, in your example, are competitive games where a team is fighting for the complete domination of another team while cooperating. And if you're not good at the game, then some people who are working hard towards increasing their rank might let you know how upsetting it is. To all female gamers out there, let me remind you that you have a mute function in every single online game that includes the ability to use a mic. You see how a quick and non-scientific claim would need so much data to explain why it's wrong? FFB, you can't make unsubstantiated claims like this. Everyone gets harassed in online games. You deal with it like an adult and mute the person if they are annoying. Treat women like adults instead of children who can't take mean words and boo-boos.
And if you think this type of messaging is exclusive to entertainment, check out this video that recently resurfaced of what was proudly preached in a North Carolina church last summer.
You'll find more women going to have shorts on than you will with pants and dresses put together. I used to say this. I haven't said this in a long time. You ready? I said, if you dress like that and you get ripped, and I'm on the jury, he's going to go free. You don't like, do you? I'm right, though. Because, you know, a man's a man.
Well, that guy's going to hell. That was Bobby Leonard, and the fact that he was allowed to state from that pulpit what I can only describe as a confession without being dragged out the front doors by his starched collar is a condemnation on that entire congregation.
I agree, this guy's insane. No one with a rational brain agrees with him, especially men, because he is speaking for men as if he knows what's inside of all our brains. He's dumb.
So gentlemen, I guess it's our bad. Our bad for believing you are what you say you are, and believing you'll do what you say you'll do.
You haven't even come close to proving your point, and the fact that you so confidently do so is embarrassing. Next time, check the data before making claims.
But you're going to have to choose. Either A, men are mindless creatures incapable of controlling their urges so they cannot be blamed for acting on them, or B, men are complex, rational human beings who must take responsibility for their actions. You cannot have both.
Subtly hinted in her preachy message is that men will have to take responsibility for their actions because men have done these actions. Men as a whole, apparently. But not all men, I hear her exclaim. To that I say, I remember Dr. Samuel Green? Yeah, I hope you like the fact I use argumentation equivalent to his.
We are all constantly bombarded with news of the terrible things that men do to women. Our society is obsessed with it, fetishizes it, yet women are expected to turn a blind eye?
I wouldn't use the news as a source for impartial reporting. Check this report out.
Morning, it's a reality for 1 in 3 women worldwide. Physical and sexual violence is now a global health problem of epidemic proportions, according to one group.
And now, let's go back to the NSVRC where the same statistic is referenced, but if you just go down by 1, you find out that 1 in 4 men will face the same thing. The news choosing to completely omit this is definitely not. Narratives are a part of the media. It's not about reporting the news, it's about telling an entertaining story.
That is until, of course, something happens to you. Then you're interrogated, shamed for not knowing better, not taking the proper precautions. It's a classic catch-22. Damned if you do, damned if you don't.
I can't take you seriously for criticizing victim blaming when you've done the exact same thing yourself. You have a double standard and you need to work through it for your own sake.
I shouldn't have to say this, but being nagged or your ex-wife boinking your buddies is not comparable to being attacked by a bear. I think the way we talk about gendered violence is completely wrong. We approach the issue as if the male population is neatly divided into good guys and bad guys, but that's not an accurate reflection of human behavior or society at all, is it?
Well, by definition, a good guy is a good guy until he does something bad and then he becomes a bad guy. Even if he never does it again, we remember what he did and keep him at arm's length for previous actions. Therefore, you can neatly separate good and bad people based on trends and possibilities.
If we limit our perspective to isolated incidents, to bad apples, it allows men who don't participate in the most heinous crimes to get defensive, say, "Not I," and stop listening.
But you are the one doing this. You are the one limiting your scope to the isolated incidents.
I wonder, would you call Junka Furuta privileged? How about 12-year-old Kimberly Leach? Was she privileged?
You are the one saying that men are dangerous because of the selective cherry-picked examples of the worst men in modern history. You haven't made some grand discussion on morality and how it can break down in certain extreme contexts. You just labeled the group of men as likely violent based on stats you barely understand and the worst examples out there, and then expect men to say yes. That is a very accurate representation of what men are. Your decision of choosing the bear over the man only makes sense if the men are more likely than not to be doing something bad, and according to the statistics, the likelihood of that happening is so low that you choosing death by bear is completely based on hysterical reactions to a low availability of undesirable outcomes. Simply put, you can only choose certain death if you know you are much more likely to be victimized by men. Not rolling a die with hundreds of millions of sides that are positive is only done so because you don't think the die is the way it is. Certain death is the point of the bear, and even if you say, well, not all bears attack, remember you are stuck in the woods. Eventually, that bear will get pissed off and rip you to pieces for not leaving.
But it isn't just men who don't attack women and men who do. It's men who don't attack women and men who don't see the harm in a little locker room talk at the office once in a while. I mean, come on, it's just how men are.
Wait, how does men who assault women fit into men who make sexist jokes? How can you equivocate these two types of men at all? You don't see how these two are completely different? I'd wager that Junko Furuta and Kimberly Leach and Fan Man Yi would all choose to endure having friends that make jokes at the expense of their gender in lieu of having to experience the horrific crimes they were subjected to. Are you saying that men's horrific actions today is reserved to making off-color jokes? We're doing pretty good then, I'd say. I disagree. There are men out there that do a lot worse than jokes. These are the guys I found the numbers for, and these are the guys that are so rare that they are most likely not in your group of friends.
It's men who have that one friend in their friend group who they know harasses women, but that's just Todd. You don't get it. That's just how Todd is. It's men who keep demanding a woman's phone number over and over and over again, even though she's already told him she's not interested.
I'd wager a guess that if Todd took a step too far and physically harassed a woman, and his friends knew about it, they would curb stomp him. Now, I wouldn't speculate on the numbers because I have no clue how you would study this phenomenon, but women on modern apps like TikTok claim that men who don't push further to get what they want are yay.
I went on a date with this guy, and he was like, it's getting late, do you want to come back to my place? And I was like, sure, but I'm not gonna sleep with you. Like, that's not happening. And he was like, that's totally fine. Just come over. And I was like, cool. So I go to his place. He respects my wishes. He's so nice. He cuddles me all night. And I'm like, are you gay? Like, what? And like, I just wanted him to like try, and then for me to be like, no, you know what I mean?
To men I say this, if she says no, move on. If she wanted more and was playing hard to get, the last person you want in a relationship is someone who expects you to be a mind reader.
You see, if we view male violence as an integrated system where the action and inaction of the good guys fuels and shields the worst offenders, then that's something that every single man can participate in dismantling by calling out bad behavior, supporting victims, and leading by example.
No matter how good I and every man I know is, it won't matter to the actions of the tiny minority of monsters. The male violence phenomenon is not a system built to exist, it's a random and unexpected series of actions from the few. If male violence could be quote-unquote dismantled, it would need to be built up in the first place, and for that to be the case, you can't have the existence of justice systems that are solely there to condemn these people.
But if you're a man that just feels angry and personally attacked by the bear versus man hypothetical, instead of seeing it as an opportunity to be the type of man a woman would feel safe alone in a forest with, then you're probably not the good guy you think you are.
Alright, let me throw your logic back to you. If you were a child and you had to choose your lone custodial parent, would you choose your mom or your dad? When asked this question, the overwhelming majority of people said the dad. When asked why, they stated that almost 71% of children killed by a single parent are killed by their mothers. Women everywhere were outraged at this notion, saying that they would never kill their children. Women left comments and made TikToks saying, So you think I'm a murderer?
Aw, I'm sorry you came to that completely unrelated and self-centered conclusion. That must be really hard for you.
When a mother wrote choosing the dad because children's safety is paramount, women proceeded to harass this user for their comment. When a person tweeted that their mother is great and would never do that to her, and would die for her instead of hurt her.
Interesting, irrelevant factoid, Helen. Too bad I don't get to choose your heroic
mother
in this scenario. For your information,
my mother is
frankly epic,
and she would never hurt me. But she's also a kind person who is sympathetic and understanding when I bring up children's issues.
Instead of blowing a blood vessel trying to defend her honor.
When a mother stated, "I ain't never hit my child," I responded with, "Wow, lady.
That's super cool. Should we throw a party? Should we invite the Dalai Lama?"
When another mother made a TikTok stating the hypothetical is any mother, not a murdering mother. No one said anything about murdering mothers. I told them,
wrong. You were the one changing the hypothetical.
The mother
could be any
mother.
From the most dangerous, perverted sicko that's ever roamed the streets to a
Maud Flanders-esque motherly figure
holding an impossibly delicious mug of hot chocolate. I feel like I'm going insane. It's a random
mother or a random father.
So questions like, what if
the mother is
nice? What if
the mother
is me? What if I have a gun? What if
the mother is
gay? What if
the dad is
gay? Are completely irrelevant. Just because
people
are answering a question in a way that makes you personally uncomfortable doesn't mean that the question was asked in bad faith.
When a mom made a TikTok stating that you must have had a privileged life to choose the dad, I said,
I wonder, would you call
Nicole Town
privileged? How about
3-year-old Michael Daniel Smith and 14-month-old Alexander Tyler Smith? Were they
privileged?
Choosing the dad over the mom
comes down to a very logical comparison of possible outcomes. You see how a lot of that circle is on
the mother
side? Not all. A lot of people have been saying that this hypothetical was only created to make
mothers
look bad and stoke unnecessary controversy. Which is a convenient thing to believe if you are unaffected by the reality represented by the hypothetical. But you're going to have to choose. Either A,
mothers
are mindless creatures incapable of controlling their
murderous
urges so they cannot be blamed for acting on them, or B,
mothers are
complex, rational human beings who must take responsibility for their actions. You cannot have both. If we limit our perspective to isolated incidents, to bad apples, it allows
mothers
who don't participate in the most heinous crimes to get defensive, say, not I, and stop listening. But it isn't just
mothers that don't kill children and mothers who do. It's mothers who don't attack children and mothers who don't see the harm in a little bit of child abuse in the living room once in a while.
I mean, come on, it's just how
mothers are. It's mothers that have that one friend in Pilates class who they know beats their children, but that's just Tina. You don't get it. It's just how Tina is. You see, if we view mothers' violence as an integrated system where the action and inaction of mothers fuels and shields the worst offenders, then that's something that every single mother
can participate in dismantling by calling out bad behavior, supporting victims, and leading by example.
But if you're a mother that just feels angry and personally attacked by the dad versus mom hypothetical instead of seeing it as an opportunity to be the type of mother a child would feel safe alone in the house with,
then you're probably not the good
mom you think you
are.
Well, guys, this has been fun.
Do you get it now? Do you understand why people were offended by the man v bear question? Do you see how painting a very specific picture based on barely understood statistics could alienate and piss off people who are painted as some sort of violent maniac? Are you finally capable of understanding that these questions are only used because people already know the majority answer beforehand and thus the participants will predictably answer wrong? Do you realize that the reason women chose bear is because they have been fed a lie? The lie is that SA is a common practice between men. Do you understand how you have been manipulated by the media and cleverly worded statistics so that you could line the pockets of grifters who benefit off of your fear and panic? Can you finally see how unabashedly offensive it is to call men potential aurists based on numbers you don't understand? Similarly to how I used the 71% statistic. By the way, if anyone watching believed that that would mean all mothers are potential murderers, what I cleverly didn't do is mention any other variable to this statistic, like, oh, I don't know, 80% of single parent households are led by mothers? Do you see how just because 80% of single households are led by women and 71% of single child parent murders are mothers, it doesn't mean that only 9% of mothers wouldn't kill their children? Do you see how you can't say mathematically speaking there must be a non-trivial amount of mothers who kill their children, instead of the reality that single mothers are overrepresented in single household statistics, and thus they by design will be overrepresented in single parent child murder cases? Do I need to bring up the black crime statistics again? Or are you going to, by proxy of your methodology, admit to wanting to avoid black people based on the overrepresentation in crime statistics? Do you get how dumb you are being for using this argumentation? Do you see how you're not using logic and math, but instead you are using feelings and gut instincts to make your judgments? Either way, the video ends on another joke and the Patreon credits. What a travesty of argumentation, and what an atrocious video. You should be ashamed of yourself for what you're telling your audience. The best way to describe this is fear-mongering. You are creating resentment based on completely arbitrary assumptions that lead to nothing more than fear and loathing. By misunderstanding statistics, cherry-picking examples, all the while criticizing others for doing the same, dismissing stories of people pouring out their hearts on the internet, misrepresenting actions by singular individuals, repackaging data for your own narratives, making actions that are seen in both sexes seem like only men's actions, trying to use motives to somehow prove your point, arguing that video game harassment is mostly done to women, and pretending that women couldn't take it because they are babies that can't use the mute button, insinuating that men should take responsibility for actions that they never have or would ever do, and then acting as if there is this system that men partake in order to harass women and needs dismantling, even though aurists and murderers have been getting executed for centuries now. Honestly, I have no idea what can be salvaged from your video. FunkyFrogBait, if you are watching and made it to the end, first off, Jesus, you are thick-skinned. And second off, I want you to know that this video wasn't made out of anger. It wasn't because I felt the need to be mean to you for the offense I felt. Rather, it's because I started researching your claims. Personally, if you want my honest viewpoint on the man v bear question, I can understand why someone would make the bear choice when they are uninformed, and I would never judge women for that. After doing the research though, it seems silly for women to make that choice. I wouldn't choose the bear because I would assume I could try to beat up the man, but I am assuming that the man is violent in that scenario. Similarly to the women, that is because the question is made in a way that makes people assume the man is going to be violent. Otherwise, why is the bear an option? You realize the whole point of mentioning the bear is to make the man seem like an equivalent threat, right? What I have a problem with is when you act as an authority on the discussion, because people will use your video to explain the rationalization, not based on your arguments because you didn't have any good ones. They will assume you are right because of your production value and relatively tight script. By tackling this question without much research and by just basing it on your worldview, you end up creating a whirlwind of resentment and hatred on both sides, where both men and women cannot coexist peacefully. The anger and vitriol exhibited by my video towards you happens when you show your biases, your dismissal of the male experience, the same way you say men do, your usage of derogatory terms like incel, just like feminist has become, which don't aid in the overall discourse and only lead to naming and blaming instead of talking. As hateful as this video might seem, I want you to know that I truly believe that you meant well, and I admire your dedication for that. But as YouTubers, when we make content that is reliant on data and probabilities, we can't be willy-nilly about the statistics. Otherwise, what stops your opposition from doing the same and getting away with it? The left has been winning for way too long, and thus they feel like they can just say things and not get chastised for these things, even when they are not being objective and accurate. That is why Trump won. People don't want you to act as if you already won the argument, even if you believe it to be the case. If you pretend that your opposition is so wrong that they can never be right, which materializes itself as let's just make jokes about a person who is making points instead of arguing his points, people will start to listen to the side that is making points even if they are wrong. That being said, even when you do make points, especially when they relate to the sexes, you should make sure to mention both sides of the argument, otherwise people will assume you are blaming the entirety of the other side, even though you are talking about a very small minority of monsters. I should probably make a video about how the left just killed itself by failing to argue, and instead assumed they're right due to them winning for decades in the media, and how the circles of these media conglomerates are just massive billion-dollar echo chambers that are held up in big part by their opposition, which leads to their destruction because of alienation of the growing number of socially rejected individuals. Actually, watch my video on pride and empowerment. I mentioned that there. I hope that video was fun for someone out there, god, over 15,000 words. You really dragged it out of me, FFB. Love ya, girl. Check out her channel if you haven't. Not all of her videos are feminism related, and she definitely puts effort in her content. Alright, see yous.